Hi there. My name is Dick McEvoy, and I welcome you to my studio and to this Weir Farm, Weir Pond webinar. This webinar, I hope it'll be a fun 30 minutes with you, is meant for anyone who has ever had that urge to paint and thought, I would like to try it. I'm telling you right now, and this webinar is about, let's try it. Let's get going. And it's also for those people who've been painting for a little bit but want to improve their own style, improve their own palette. I'm going to give you some ideas on how to do that. But thank you so much for coming. In this first slide here, we'll talk about a little bit about my background. Who am I? I started painting as a little kid, but I really realized that I loved it when I got to college and I took some courses at the school next to me. I was at Brown University. I took courses at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. And I realized from that point on that I don't want to do it for a living because I was afraid of being poor. But I loved painting, I loved drawing, and I wanted to do more with it. Over the next 10 years after college, I painted 5, 6, or 7 paintings a year. But it wasn't until the mid-'80s, 1983, when I went to paint with my mentor, a guy named Herman Margulies, that I realized that I love this. And I painted with him for 3 different years. And at the end of that time period, he said to me, don't come back as a student. You got to paint more. And as I'm going to talk to you about, you can get a lot better very quickly from painting 1 to painting 50. But if you want to really develop your own style, your own palette, your own way of looking at a painting and producing a painting, you have to paint a lot. So in 1980, I think it was 1985, I came home to my wife and said, despite all my travel for my work I was doing, I am going to start painting 25 paintings a year. And for the next 10 years, 25 paintings a year, with the thought that, as my mentor said, now I can get a little bit better, a little bit closer to my own style every 50 paintings. So I started off, like a lot of you and like a lot of us, in Impressionism. My 11th grade French teacher had us writing a 20-page paper on our favorite French Impressionist, took us to the Boston Museum, and I fell in love with that type of work, capturing a moment in time. And here I've got 2 of my Impressionist paintings as an example. The top one, Walking in the High Sierras. I was hiking one day with my wife up in Lake Tahoe, and I came across this field. It was lush with new green growth and those red flowers or red paintbrush. But what really struck me about this particular scene, and that's why I took a picture of it and painted it later, was the dead tree that was decomposing in that lush field. And I love the juxtaposition of new life and old life. So that was a oil and enamel painting. And the bottom one was another day I was painting with a good buddy of mine, Frank Federico. We were doing plein air painting in Cold Spring, New York, kind of across the Hudson from West Point. And we had each done 2 small pastel paintings at the time. And we tried to do 2 paintings in the morning and then stop for lunch. And we were going to go to this little place called Catherine's Tuscan Grill, which I believe is still there. And as I'm walking in there to grab our sandwich and have a beer, I stopped and I said, this itself is a scene. I would love to paint this. So I took a picture, and when I came home that day with 2 small 9x12 on plein air paintings that I'd finished, I painted this back in my studio in pastel. This is 18x24. So I did Impressionism for the next 15, 20 years or so. And I was with that same buddy, Frank, at the Modern Art Museum in New York in the early 2000s when I started looking at the abstract expressionists. The abstract expressionist painters that I loved were Jackson Pollock and Joan Mitchell, Robert Motherwell, Mark Rothko, people like that. But what I had noticed that day in the museum was a lot of these people, these artists that I loved, were painting with oil and enamel. And when I said that to Frank, he kind of went, yeah. And I said, enamel paint is house paint. So from that point on, I said, I can combine house paint with enamel with my tube oil paint. And I can get different textures. I can throw this, I can drip it, I can go crazy with the different mediums. So as much as I love the totally abstract expressionist, Motherwell, Joan Mitchell, etc., I realized when I started doing it, I like to have a little bit of a landscape peek through. So this first one, another time I was hiking, I saw this milkweed pod in the brush below our feet as we're walking through the woods. And I said, I can make a painting out of that. So I got my paints and I dripped. I think this is 36 by 48, this painting. But I dripped the paint and I let that layer dry, and then I punched in a couple of dead leaves, and I dripped some more paint, and I let that layer dry. And then I punched in, when I say punch in, with my palette knife, I put in that little bit of a milkweed pod. And then the only brush work I did in this whole painting is I just kind of feathered a few feathery little seeds coming out of the milkweed pod. The bottom one is another hiking adventure. My brother-in-law has had a cabin up in the northwest hills of Connecticut for 3 or 4 generations. And we were up there hiking in his woods, and there's this beautiful waterfall deep in the woods. Now, I didn't take a picture, and this isn't that particular waterfall, but I thought of it as I got home. And I did this large painting totally with a palette knife. But with that in mind, and I used those cool greens and cool blues, and then I scraped the palette knife across to make the water, and I scraped it down to make it falling. And while I was trying to get abstract expressionist, it really became more of where my style developed into an abstract impressionism. And this is where my style is now. This next slide will show abstract impressionism. So the first one is where I've taken my sticks of paint and I've dripped color. Even though this is a lot of green reeds and leaves and different things, I don't start with greens or yellows. I start, if you can look at this painting close up, I start with reds and browns and purples and blues, and then I throw in some of the greens and the yellows. That gives it a different kind of richness. But if you can look at this closely, you'll see purples and reds that you wouldn't expect right off the bat. So I did layers of dripping, and then I go to a palette knife after those layers have dried, and I punch in a couple of flowers, and I drip some more colors in again. And at the end of this painting, I was very happy with it. I think this one is 40 by 40. It's a big square painting. But at the end of it, I punched in that red poppy because I wanted a bit more color. Can you go back one more? And this bottom painting is quite large. It's 48 by 60, Cosmos and Black-Eyed Susans. Again, a lot of my dripping, punching in colors, etc. So this is where I've developed into what I think is my own style of abstract impressionism. Even though I'm dripping and I'm throwing and I'm doing all things with color, I end up with a landscape within it. Okay. Now let me get to some of the ideas for today. The first thing I want to say to you is be adventuresome with your choice of tools. I use all kinds of things. Yes, this is my studio, and I have they're hard wooden floors, but I have tarp all over the place because I throw a lot of paint. You can see I have brushes, I have palette knives, but I would say my normal painting today, if you look at a 40 by 40 oil painting, I'll bet I use 15%. I use brushes for maybe 15% of the surface. Other than that, I'll use paper towels and rags and sponges and all kinds of other utensils. So you see these sticks here. Yes, I have my palette knives, I have my paint brushes, I also have pastels, certainly. I have well over 1,000 sticks of pastel, but you don't need all these things. You can use whatever you have. And what I'm going to say to you is, while you're being adventuresome, if you have watercolor, then paint with watercolor. But if you're a watercolorist, try something else as well. Try a pastel, or try acrylic, or try gouache, or try oil painting. Look at these tools. See these sticks on the left-hand side here? These are the same sticks that you can go to when you mix your house paint. These are the same sticks you use, but I use them to drip. And what I'll do is I'll stick my stick into the can of paint, and if I want to have a very thin line, I'll let it drip for a while. So now only just a little bit of paint is coming down, and I use that. Or if I want real thick, like stems for big, thick lilies or something, I'll take it right out of the can, and I'll scoop it across the canvas so that it have a thicker line. But look at this other utensil here, just as fun. This is a pizza cutter. You know when you make pizza at home and you want to cut it at the end, you slice it up. This is a pizza cutter. And what I have found is I love taking that pizza cutter and taking it through either the tacky paint that's already on my painting, or I take it through my palette that I've been playing with, and I make these beautiful, very, very thin lines. They're almost hard to see, but they lend a kind of an authenticity to the grasses or to the leaves or to whoever that makes it, I think, somewhat unique for me. But I try different things. I take paper towels, I take rags, all kinds of things. I'm going to show you some of that with some of the paintings that I'll exhibit here. So my next idea is to try different mediums. Again, if you're a watercolorist, try pastel or try oil. Try different tools, different sizes of canvas and paper. These are 3 paintings that I've done in the last couple months. The small one that I'm holding, I'll explain, it's almost a rag piece that I did something with. The big one behind me is a 48 by 48 beach theme. And the one to my left on the picture is, and actually it's a 20 by 16. Okay, so here are the first two. The one on the left, if you paint with me in my studio, or if you follow me in one of my video painting lessons, you'll see that next to my painting surface that I'm going to be doing my own painting with, demonstrating for you, I'll also have another surface that is there to show you strokes and show you different colors and show you how I will apply different things. So in a matter of an hour or two, that other surface becomes a mess of just strokes and colors and messy things. I had a student, he's now a good friend of mine, but I had a student with me for, I think it was 3 different sessions. And at the end of that 3rd session, I had this block of scrapes and different colors. And I said, I'm going to make a painting out of this. And so I just pulled it aside because I had so many rich colors already there on the surface, even though they were totally nondescript. I scraped a couple of blues and some purples across the top, and it became a skyline. And then I scraped some yellows for a field and maybe some beach grasses. And this whole thing probably took another 15 or 20 minutes because I already had a ton of pastel on the surface. And then I threw a pre-cut mat that happened to be 6 by 6, and I threw it over, and it became a tiny little painting. The one on the right, I was visiting with 3 other artist friends of mine, and we had arranged to paint together. And we were going to go to one of the artists. She had a beautiful poppy garden, and she had called us, and she said the poppies had just burst, and it'd be a great day to paint. So we came from different directions, and when we got to her house, it had started raining. Now, I knew I was going to paint poppies that day, so I had already pre-painted a dark surface color. And I had put some cobalt blues and some viridian green, so I had a dark greenish black background. That was dried and ready to go. So I had a surface ready to go. And with me, I brought only 1 palette knife, a roll of toilet paper, a roll of paper towels, and 10 tubes of paint. And I thought, I'm going to do this painting with that limited supply of stuff. It started raining, so we moved right into her studio, and luckily her studio is big enough that the 4 of us had our own areas to paint in. And I immediately started mixing colors, taking my 10 tubes of color and making 25 or so different colors on my palette. And then I took a paper towel that I'd been cleaning the one palette knife I had with me. So now this paper towel had all kinds of different colors on it. I scrunched it up, and then I patted it, the back of the painting, and that became a background to the painting. Okay, so I wanted to have these poppies set against some kind of background of some other foliage of some sort. And then I mixed some various blues and yellows to make a number of different greens and just popped them down with little leaves, and that became the various leafy looks to this. I scraped my palette knife through it, and it became the hint of a couple of stems. And then I mixed a little bit of white into my blue and green mixes, and it became these little pods that hadn't yet burst and started blooming for my poppies. And then I got to the fun part. I took my reds and yellows, I think I had 2 of each, and I made an assortment of colors for my poppies, and I just started throwing those colors down. This whole painting took me less than an hour. It's not about time. It's just that when you get into the spirit of it, you just move and you make it. So this painting is 20 by 16. I looked at my friends and they were all painting away. The beautiful thing of that particular day, it was fun. You're painting with friends. If you could see these 4 paintings today, if we could put them all on the same wall, you'd say, I love them all. And they're all so, it's hard to believe that, yes, they all have poppies in them, but our styles are each so different. And what I try to do with you is to help you create your own style and your own palette. When you mix paint, it's going to be different than the way I mix paint, so you're going to have your own palette. Okay, so number 2 big thing I want you to do is underpaint unabashedly. Every time I go to paint anything, I do some kind of surface color. When I went to those poppies, I had a dark bluish green. If I'm going to do this Weir Farm pond, I know there's some sediment, so I'm going to put some browns in there too. If I know I'm going to paint a big green field, if I was going to paint in Giverny, which I have done a couple of times, if I was going to paint at Monet's garden, I would go there with maybe 2 different surfaces to do 2 small paintings in a day. I would go with a dark surface to let those water lilies pop through. But I would also go with a red surface, the complement of all the greens, because all the willows and all those green things hanging down, the red coming through would make it a very lively painting. So I will always paint an underpainting. I hate to paint on a white surface. So play with your tools, try different mediums, and always use an underpainting. Okay, next. I'm going to show you, I had shown you those 2 small paintings. At the same time, I had the large beach scene behind me. I will take you through each of these, but what this started off with is I had I think this is 48 by 48 big oil, and I had done something similar, but I had done it at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So everything was sunlight, everything was a lot of green, the sand was warm. I decided to sit in my studio and imagine the exact same scene, but imagine it at night and imagine it as if the sun had just set. So I'm going to take you through each of these to show you how I paint in layers, and I think about painting in layers. The first layer is, all right, I want to get a sketch down. I know now that my colors are going to be cool because this is going to be nighttime. So I'm allowing myself more blues in the dark. And so I just established this beautiful dark underpainting, and I take a pastel stick. A new pastel stick is rectangle, so I can use that to get the shape. These pastel sticks are going to go away very shortly, you'll see. But I wanted to get a basic sketch in for my head where I wanted this paint to build from. So I sketched in, the snow fence or the dune fencing. Second slide for this is I paint in layers. All of these grasses and things are going to be put against that beautiful sky. I'm hoping my sky becomes beautiful. So I have to paint the sky in first because everything else is going to set against it. So again, as I'm thinking about layers, I paint what's behind all those grasses. So now this is with a brush. I put a bunch of colors down and try to make it a dramatic sunset. And I get that mostly in, and anytime that my brush starts to get a little bit dry, before I go to get more medium, I'll put that same dry brush into the fencing and into the grasses, just to lend some of those same thoughts, some of those same colors into the grasses, and most of it will disappear, but it'll be helpful in the end. Okay, so now in the next step, this is where I have fun and I start dripping. I take my sticks of color, and even though we all think of dune grasses as green and yellow, I never will start with green and yellow. I will always start with purple and blue and brown and ochres and all these different colors that have nothing to do, and reds that have nothing to do with the way we think about it. But then I'll add some greens at the end. Okay, so when I'm dripping the enamel paint, I know that it's going to take 24 hours or so to dry, but in 3 or 4 hours, it's still quite tacky. Now you can see here that all of my fencing has disappeared. Remember, that was there for my head to think where I was going to put it. I kind of see a little bit of where it is. So now I take a paintbrush and I turn it over and I use the butt end of it. And I scrape in those same colors. I don't know if you did this when you were a kid. I forget what grade school, it was probably second or third grade, but you would color your piece of paper with lots of different crayons, lots of different colors. It didn't matter what. And then you take a dark ink and lay it across the top. And now you basically had a black surface. But you'd take your pencil and you'd sketch in or etch in a little house, a little tree, a little dog, and such. But you'd end up with an etching, because as you scratch the black surface, what would come through is all those beautiful colors that were underneath. That's kind of what I'm doing here. So I'm scratching in. As I'm scratching in that fencing, I'm picking up all the various colors that are in those drips, okay? And then the next layer, again, I'm getting closer and closer to the finish line. I take a palette knife and I throw a couple places where I might have goldenrod or whatever, just a hint of it. As you look at this painting up close, it's just a blob of orangey, yellow, ochre type colors. But this is where I get adventuresome again, too. I take my little pizza cutter, and I may have some colors here on my palette that I can scrape through, which I do. But I also, because this is tacky right now, I'll just scrape it right through the colors that are there, and it'll pick up just enough color that you'll see these very fine grasses. It's hard to see in this picture, but if you can see this painting in real life, you'll see all these beautiful fine lines that have crazy colors within them. If you look close, I mean, you almost have to use a magnifying glass to see all the colors that are there, but it becomes, I think, emotionally charged. I love doing it, but it's, again, using different tools. So you might look at your kitchen utensils a little different in the future. All right. If you have a desire down the road, you can paint with me via my video painting lessons. And one of these lessons is called the Weir Pond. But I'm going to show you how I think, again, in layers, and how the Weir Pond painting we would build, whether you do it in your home and me and mine as we're doing it together. Weir Pond, J. Alden Weir was an American Impressionist painter, early 1900s. And he had 140 acres, about 35 or 40 minutes from my home in Connecticut, and it became a national park. So you can paint there. It's lovely. It's got some great outbuildings and some fields. And if you walk through the woods, you can get to this small pond, which I have painted a number of times. This painting was done on plein air. I did a little 9x12, and I sold it maybe 10 years ago. But I have a picture of it. So we're going to do this painting from a picture of my painting. And that's quite often what I would do. I would take a 9x12 or a small on plein air painting back to my studio and use that as a prop to then make a much larger painting. And I'm going to make this into an 18x24 pastel painting in this video painting lesson. But let me talk to you through the layers and how I look at things. I see this as having 6 different layers to it. The furthest layer back, number 1, is the background. The woods behind the pond. And you can see that I purposely left off no sky up top. I want that to be more dramatic. By not seeing any sky in the top of the painting, I love the drama of the reflections of that sky that we can't see, but in the bottom of the painting. So layer number 1 is the furthest back. Layer number 2, I'm going to show you that I have 3 different levels of poppies, water lilies and such. So the first one, furthest back, is layer number 2. And while this whole pond, I think this whole pond was maybe 4 feet deep. So the water in layer 2, while it's almost a bluish black, it's the same depth as layer 3, but the sun is actually hitting layer 3. Okay, so as I move closer, the water lilies get more and more detail. And as I move closer, the water goes from what looks like very deep to a level where I can actually see the sun bouncing off the sediment and the leaves and stuff on the bottom. Okay, so there's layer 1, 2, and 3. Now I go to layer 4, getting closer, even closer to me. This is the set of water lilies that are the closest. And while I will never paint an actual water lily, I will suggest the shape a bit more here, and I'll show you a bit more detail to the color, and I'll show you a couple little actual flowers that are blooming there. And then level 5 is where I get to all these beautiful reflections of the sky. I can make this up totally because you can't see. No one else can see what I saw from the bank that day. So I can have a blast with these reflections. And then level 6 is that part of the land that has popped up through the water, the brush and the things, the various vegetation there. Now, oftentimes when I come back from a plein air painting, I will want to just touch it up a bit. And if you've painted more than one painting in your life, I know you've probably screwed up something by overworking it. I don't allow myself more than 10 or 12 minutes. I just make it a deal with myself. So if I walk in the next day and I want to touch it up, I'll give myself a few minutes to do it. Now, what I might do for touch up here on this painting was I did add a few more little reflections to the grasses and to the bushes that came out of the water, and I added a couple more distinct colors in the reflections on the water, on the actual water surface, to give it what I call more pop. But if I keep myself to 10 minutes or less, I still keep that spontaneous look to it. So let me go into some of what we've learned today. First thing, you're here because you have some interest in painting and you'd like to maybe give it a try, or you've been painting for a while and you'd like to refresh your style and improve your style. All those reasons are great. What I'm saying is take action, whether it's with me or on your own. You can paint some beautiful paintings with whatever materials, whatever medium you have, but take action, start painting. Number 2, take chances. Crumple up that paper towel, and smush it up and see what you get. You're going to get a new mixture of color. You're going to get a new process of putting pigment on the surface. Be adventuresome with your choice of tools. Use the butt handle of the brush. You can look at your kitchen utensils differently from now on. Number 4, surprise yourself. Challenge yourself. When I go to paint plein air, I make myself paint a painting usually in an hour or less. A couple of reasons. One is I love doing it, but I usually paint either early in the morning or late in the afternoon where the shadows are beautiful. But those shadows change very quickly because the sun is either going up quickly or coming down quickly. So if you're still looking an hour later, you're starting to chase those shadows as they get shorter. I'm not going to do that. When I'm in the field, I will paint for 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, looking at my scene, and then I'll maybe paint another half hour, but I have stopped looking because I'm not going to chase those shadows. Give yourself that challenge. It'll be spontaneous, it'll be emotional. The other thing is try painting alla prima. Alla prima means starting and finishing a painting in one setting. It sounds daunting at first, but the more you do it, the more you're going to have a blast doing it, and the more it's going to free up your spirit. And then finally, be kind to yourself. We have all screwed up paintings. Anyone who's ever painted in their life has screwed up a painting. Be kind to yourself. Recognize that there's progress being made. One of the best things that my mentor 40 years ago said to me was, just paint. I was only painting 5 to 10 paintings a year. That's not enough to really move to where I wanted to be. And he said, you can get a lot better very quickly, but then to get to be your own look, you get a little bit better every 50 paintings. And that's where my 25 to 40 paintings a year, I've probably done, well over 1,200 paintings now in the last 35 years. I do get a little bit better every 50 paintings, and I love it. Okay, so I am greatly appreciative that you're here. If you'd like to paint, I do have a video lesson you can try. But if you don't, I'm going to give you my email. You can ask me any question you want because I do enjoy teaching. But from this video, We Are Farm Painting, you will get a 2.5-hour one-on-one video demonstration lesson with me. And the reason it takes me 2.5 hours is because I'm talking the whole time. I'm painting and I'm talking, I'm explaining everything I'm doing. You will also get a downloadable 6-module set so that everything I say in that 2.5 hours, I don't give it to you word for word, but I basically reverberate or regurgitate it back to you. And I let you hear everything that I've said. So the way I would suggest you use this, if you choose to buy this video painting lesson, is to watch the video straight through, then listen to or read the downloadable modules, then go back and start it again, and paint alongside me. You in your studio, me in mine, just like you would be doing in my studio with me. Step 3 here is you will have fun. You will have started to learn not to be anxious. There are no mistakes. I don't worry about mistakes, and you won't worry either. You'll see how we can improve almost anything we do. You'll begin to see with an artist's eye and a mindset. You'll see how I look to paint in layers, how I see what's underneath to come back up. And you'll prove to yourself that you really do have an artist within you. I will help you unleash that artist spirit, and I will have a blast doing it. Okay, the next slide is your video lesson today. Okay, so what you will do if you had this video lesson, you will end up painting your own version of Weir Pond. No one's going to look at your version versus mine, or yours versus the painting I did 10 years ago. You will finish your own painting, and I think it's a painting that you'll be very happy with. If you choose to do this, you can go to my website and you can order it there. The way we price this is 35, 40 years ago, 1983, 84, 85, when I was painting with my mentor, Herman, I was paying him $250 a day for this same kind of teaching, the same kind of look at what makes a scene emotionally exciting to us. And so that's how I price these video painting lessons. And if you'll act in the next day or two, whether it's this lesson, and we'll make it so that you can buy the other lesson if you'd like, it's 20% off, so it would be $200. No matter what you do, I am so thankful that you're here. I do love to teach, so if you have any questions, there's my website, but there's my email, dickmcavoy24. Send me an email, ask me any question you want. I will get back to you. It might take me a few days, but I will get back to you. And again, I want to thank you so much for joining me in this webinar today. Thank you for your interest in art, and good luck with your future in this painting business. Thanks very much.